pushing things,
We don't want to watch.
trying things, but I have, and I've got it much stronger now since I became a parent, which is there's a sort of sense of a thing I never had before, which I'm going to call responsibility, which is, for example, if I see a kid in the audience, instantly a whole series of thoughts come into my brain about things, about, I'm not going to say this. I'm concerned about that kid. I don't know anything about the kid. The kid might be a preternatural genius who's got the capacity to he's read Fairy Queen aged 7 kind of thing. He's going, well, I'm really enjoying the subtext here, but I feel the sexual innuendo should be stronger. And, he might be, but I can't help but seeing that because as a parent, you're so conscious of this other thing outside of you that you now value higher than you do yourself, and it affects you in your judgments. Things like I can't watch certain things now without being aware of it.
Yeah.
And as a performer, I know that's a thing in me now, and a responsibility towards the audience that I feel, which is this is the thing that Ken Campbell used to say when he was talking about actors and subsidized arts. He was saying subsidized arts take the honesty out of a performer because you're going to get paid anyway.
Yeah.
But when it's, if I don't make you laugh, I don't get paid, then you have to deliver.
Yeah.
Then you have to know your audience, know the room, judge a change, and you have to deliver. Your skills have to make those people happy enough to give you the money. And that's really honest. And when you earn money like that, like street performing or stuff like that, that sort of £10 feels like 100.
Yeah.
I always felt. I felt, oh, this is honest. I honestly earned this.
Yeah. They wouldn't have given it anyway.
No, and that's that. I'm a little bit, I guess it's part of my upbringing. There's a slight Puritan element about artists, like how self-indulgent it can be. How much of this is you parading your issues in front of me, and the rest of it, and how much is this personal just indulgence?
Yes.
Okay, rather than something more.
What do you think is the line between indulgence and vulnerability?
I think it's all in the honesty of the performer.
Yeah.
And that will be judged by the audience. What I think is honest, someone else might not.
Yeah. But that's also the difficulty, right?
Yeah. But
because there isn't a right, again, and as soon as you try to get it right, you immediately step into that place that can be more presentational.
Yes.
That's like, I'm doing it right, aren't I?
Yes.
Suddenly you've lost it. It's like, as soon as you, almost like as soon as you care about the outcome being what you require it to be, you've lost it already.
Yeah.
And only by, again, it's like taking the risk to show a part of yourself, knowing that not everybody's going to see or get it, or people might think that something's indulgent and somebody else might see the truth in it. It's all a risk.
I think there's an element of finding your voice. You know that expression for comedians or for singers, and I think it very much applies, finding your clown. You know that expression. And you find the thing that works for you, and it works for you because it's honest, because it's authentic. The audience see your vulnerability, and through that voice, you can then express many different things. And as long as you are presenting that authentic voice, then I don't think it's indulgent, because you're putting something out there that is genuinely you, part of you. And then it's okay. And then you can do almost anything.
Yeah. It's not really about what you do. It's probably about intention then.
Yes.
Like there's something with clown which always feels like purity of heart. Like, I don't really like purity as a concept.
I know. I've met the cruise cougar. I know how pure that is.
I mean, I think it just comes with a lot of baggage, the idea of purity. But I do think that purity of intention, it takes you a long way. It's like what place is this coming from in you? Like, are you opening yourself to really be seen, or to really explore something, or to really express something in that place of everything on the table? Or are you trying in any way to engineer the outcome. And if you're trying to engineer the outcome, or if you're in any way trying to engineer the response, then it becomes manipulative.
Yes, yeah. And why? Why are you here? Why are you on stage?
And then people don't trust you at some level.
Yeah.
Because it's not a true giving of yourself. It's like a conditional, it's like a trick.
Yeah, and there's also an element of, oh, you're up there. All right, then, impress me.
Yeah.
Do what you're going to do. And, you've stood up and said, look at me. Why are you worth looking at? Show me your value. And that's a weird thing because you're not a performer unless you've got a certain degree of ego.
Yeah.
It's just that's a baseline. Otherwise, you wouldn't stand up
You have
there.
to like the response.
You have to like the attention in some way because it gives you value. We're all deeply, deeply damaged, vulnerable, desperate people who, for some reason, crave valuation by a bunch of strangers. Let's not go there. That's another thing.
Booze, we don't care which.
Yes, whatever.
We just want your response.
Yeah. Any attention is good attention.
Yeah.
Even if you're throwing things at me, at least it's attention.
Yeah. At least I'm seen. I'm here.
Yeah. So, but that's a weird thing.
Yeah.
But people respond to that because I think they recognise it that everybody wants that in their own different way. The audience too, as well. They're just not. They don't have the vocabulary, or they don't want to take that extra leap and stand in the spotlight. There's Bruce Springsteen did this really interesting documentary about I can't remember what it's called, like the 8 foot to the microphone, which is the difference between being in a band and the backing singers and being the lead. And though it's only a few feet to that lead microphone, it's a huge distance, really.
Yeah.
You carry the band.
Yeah.
And so you can be a great singer. Probably better musicians are in the background, all the rest of it. But it's that will of ego that takes you to the center mic.
Yes, you're hired as a backing singer or as a supporting musician. You're hired purely on your skill.
Yeah.
But as a front man or a front person, you're you have to want to be there.
And
you have to want to be there.
And
That's
performers are like that. Quite often, I sometimes find, I'm feeling a bit more comfortable playing supporting roles here. I know some of my colleagues are on fire. Well, okay, not a problem. But then there's a little bit of me that sort of goes, okay, I think I quite like to be in the centre mic now. do you must have that?
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I think because I've done a lot of stuff that's ensemble based, and I really like that. I think there's a difference, I suppose, between working as an ensemble and working as something that feels like a lead and a backup.
But isn't there a trust in an ensemble, having worked in ensembles too, that we all share this, which means the ball will move around. I will have moments.
Yeah.
But you will have moments too. And we will share those moments out. And I know that by supporting you, when the time comes, you will support me. So it's a very, human troop activity, a social activity.
And I suppose all of that stuff, improv, clown, ensemble work, it teaches you as well that you're making your contribution sometimes by stepping back. Like, if you're in an improv show, sometimes the fact that you didn't get up to do that scene is you making that scene better.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
You can't, if everybody piles on the stage because everybody wants to be on the stage, none of the scenes are going to be good ever. Like that scene was only created and only able to become what it was because you made the choice not to get up,
and every so
not
often,
to be in it.
Every so often there is a scene that's best, it's best not to all jump into that lifeboat because that lifeboat is going down.
Oh, let it go down.
Yeah, let's not make it a Titanic.
What was it like working with Ken Campbell?
I only worked with him briefly. Ken Campbell, for those who may not know him, is a theatre iconoclast who in the 60s and 70s just created so much stuff and shaped a lot of actors and performers, but was always challenging, was always breaking the system. So it's that you get from him, which is the what can you do to go further? And the instantaneous of it. This is boring. What's it? I've seen it now. You're just repeating the same thing again and again. Yeah. You're being clever. You're speaking text nicely. Yeah. You're telling the story well. You're doing acting. Yeah. I
Yeah.
know what's going to happen now. What else? So what else is new, bud?
Yeah.
What's the new thing? What we were just talking about earlier on, that move on, open the door, go where it's interesting, take me somewhere I didn't expect.
Yeah.
He was full of that. But he crossed that with massive self-indulgence, because he would say, well, I want you to go where I'm interested. I'm directing this show.
Yeah.
I want to see what happens when this happens. I don't care what they think, but I want to know what's going to happen.
Making it for him.
But he was
to
honest.
Entertain him.
Yeah, but the thing was about Ken, any Ken show you knew instantly was a Ken Campbell show because it was so authentic to Ken.
Yeah.
So that was the thing. You say, okay, I understand. He's not making this for my benefit.
Yeah.
He's making this honestly because he thinks this is interesting, and he's showing it to me on that basis. I think this is interesting and I think you might enjoy it, but I'm not trying to make you enjoy it.
There's something nice about that in terms of creating art as well, because Rick Rubin talks about that, that making Rick Rubin, obviously a music producer, famous, very, very prolific, famous music producer, but definitely comes from a space of, quite a spiritual space, obviously, this space of accessing creativity rather than producing a product, producing an outcome. He speaks about, I'm making what I like. I actually don't care whether the audience likes it or not because I'm not making it for them. And again, like what we were talking about before, it's like conversely, when you do that, the audience are actually more inclined to like it because they're seeing something that you genuinely followed and you genuinely wanted to make, and you followed your impulses and your responses, and you pleased yourself as an artist, and then you created something out of that holds an authenticity to it, that people respond to the authenticity. Again, it's all the same thing, rather than I have given you what I think you're going to want, which immediately makes something feel a bit empty and a bit sort of constructed and formulaic or too thought out, because you can't think really, you don't know what an audience wants to see. You're trying to imagine that you can get into the heads of people, of like the general public. It suddenly becomes vague. And it's like that thing of the more specific you are, the more universal you are, which I've always thought is a really interesting idea. So like often you want to reach more people, or you want to be more relatable, so that the impulse would be, okay, go broad, go vague. But nobody really connects to it because it's vague. If you go really super specific, it's surprising how many people connect to that, because whether they're connected to the actual specifics that you put forward or not, again, it's something that is carrying with it a deeper level of truth.
Yes.
Because you were willing to say, not like a broad concept, but a very, very ultra specific truth.
Yes.
That everybody can get on board with, weirdly.
Finding your voice.
Yeah.
And the more specific your voice, the greater option you give people to, if I like this, I'm going to buy into this voice. Another theatre person was Lindsay Kemp.
Yes.
Who was very much that. Lindsay Kemp was very unique, and he would do, these are my shows. It's a Lindsay Kemp show. And people would go and see it. A lot of people would go and see it because they loved that flavour.
Yeah.
That's what they wanted. It gave them what they needed. But at heart of that, you could call him being incredibly self-indulgent, because they all featured him and his white face and his red hair, and he'd be doing, oh, darling, he's acting here. And there was an element of that. There was absolutely diva-ish.
Yeah.
But he combined it with technique, which I think is a thing we haven't spoken about, and I think is really important. It's all very good having the voice and the concept, but if you're not delivering it with technique on stage, they don't see it. He did, later in his life, he was on a TV program in Italy, a weird sort of, a chat show with Lionel Richie, who was the other guest. And Lionel Richie didn't know who this man was, this sort of 60-year-old, short, bald man who was there with paintings that he'd done. And then the Italian presenter said, all right, so Lionel, you're going to sing. And Lindsay, perhaps you'd like to do some dance behind it? And you could see Lionel Richie going, what?
Who's this guy?
So he starts singing Hello, I think it is, some of these songs. He starts singing on it, and Lana and Lindsay is standing, this bald, short man is standing behind him, and Lana's looking at the corner and saying, "Boy, I've got a weird harmony." And then really slowly, Lindsay starts moving his hands and doing the music. And because he's just genuinely doing this thing, and he's so accurate with his moves, you suddenly see a moment when Lionel Richie goes, "Oh, this is good. This guy knows what he's doing. This is going to be good." And it takes off. And it's so simple, but you could see that it was two artists working in very different ways, but he suddenly recognized it.
Yeah.
Lionel Richie recognized, this man is, I get this, because it was true, it was genuine.
Yeah.
And his technique was such that his movements had authenticity in them.
Yeah.
Little hand movements, gestures, and the rest of it. It was brilliant. It was a really fascinating example of what looked like, this is just going to be a car crash. This is never going to work. But because of what you just described, Lindsay's focused authenticity in himself and the way he performed, that became an asset for another performer. And together they created a unique thing.
Oh, wow. That's awesome. Yeah, and well done on Lionel for going with it.
Yeah. Respect to Lionel Richie.
Commitment, I guess, is also the thing. Like, you can get away with almost anything if you're 100% committed.
Yes.
Like, if you doubt, if you sit on the fence in any way, if you half do something, you won't get away with it. It's that as well. That's what I think part of the... Yeah, I like what you just described, that kind of occurred to me, that it's like, especially when you're in a situation that could well be awkward in the wrong way, like you just committing 100% to what you're doing, there's like a level of confidence. And I don't even think it's the same thing as confidence. I think it's just kind of like knowing that whatever it is you're doing, you're going to do it 100%.
Adam Megiddo, the director for our Sherlock Holmes, who I've worked a lot with, he has an expression which he calls front-footing it. To front-foot it, you've probably heard this, which is, in the slightest moment of doubt, most people will step back. But no, step forward, step into the light.
Yes.
Take it on. That makes it look like this is planned, I'm confident, I'm dealing with it.
Yes.
And I think that's a really good note,
Yeah.
particularly for improvisers. But acting generally, it's that stepping forward takes it on.
Yeah, and again, similarly to what we spoke about a little bit before, Adam Megiddo says if there's a line in the script that you don't really like as an actor, or you don't feel fully comfortable with as an actor, that line is probably holds something much more important. Like, it was a really cool thing that he pointed out during this rehearsal process, that the line that you secretly a little bit want to cut as an actor.
Yes, he did, didn't he?
Is the line that probably holds more importance for you than any other line. I just thought that was a really interesting and very true and beautiful concept, and a great challenge as an actor.
Speaking of Adam, when did you first come into contact with him?
Wow, probably 2009, 2010, only through improvathons.
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
So improvathons, what are improvathons?
So the improvathon, as you know, is... that's a Ken Campbell thing. No, that's a Dynasty thing.
Yeah, but Ken Campbell started that. He brought it over here. He sent Adam and others and Sean, they're these Canadians doing this crazy thing. Go over and find out about it and bring it back. Yeah.
So Dynasty is a company in Alberta, Canada. Incredible improvisers, incredible company, brilliant, beautiful people. And essentially they started out by doing an improvised soap opera that was one episode at a time. On a weekly basis, and the audience will come and see this week's episode, and it was all improvised, but it's long form narrative, so there are the same characters, and you follow these characters, and it's all in a setting, much as you would watch a soap opera or a drama or something like that. And then they decided to do the improvathon, which was essentially kind of like sitting down to binge a box set of a show for 50 hours straight without stopping. And I believe they were just like, let's see if we could do this. And Mark Meir was the first person to do, as far as I'm aware, the first person to do the whole thing all the way through, and survived. And so other people started doing it too. And then, it got brought over here by Ken Campbell and others. And I went into it through Impropriety in Liverpool, which is a Liverpool-based improv company. Rosie Wilkinson and Paul Robinson really sort of spearheaded beginning that thing in Liverpool. And we did a 33.5-hour improvathon. And I did that a couple of times and sort of just immediately wanted more. It's the kind of thing that it's such an incredible world that you create together. You are joining in with the imagination of a group of other people, and between you, you are creating this world that becomes very, very real, and you really care about it. And yes, there's elements that are to do with sleep deprivation, and there's the idea that your critical mind, your editorial mind starts to fall asleep, and you're kind of left with the lizard brain, right? The underneath part of you, the impulse, and you can't really edit yourself anymore. You become very real, very vulnerable, sometimes for better, sometimes for worse. Yeah. But what you find is that improvisers become very free. And I think that combined with this very loving and very supportive, creative, this imagined world that gets created by you and with you and around you together, that everybody invests in, to have an experience where everybody is investing in building something together for that long, for that amount of time, these relationships that develop between characters and the story arcs and where things go and anything that needs to happen, everybody's there to support it and to create it and to make it happen in ways that honestly, I know, feel magical. Like, the experience of it is really profound.
Which was the first London improv one you jumped in on?
The Greeks.
Oh, right.
No, sorry. Studio 51. Studio 54. Hang on, what's it called?
Yeah,
Is it 54?
Something like that. The American Dance Studio.
Andy Warhol thing.
Yeah.
I get Studio 54 and Area 51 muddled up in my head.
Well, of course, I'm sure they crossed over in that one.
Studio 50, it was called, because of the 50 hours.
That's right.
Oh, so yeah, it was set in New York in the 60s, and we were all artists, and I was a roller skating disco girl called Roller Lola.
Yes,
yeah.
I remember.
Yeah, who were you in that one?
I was Andrew Pugsley was Meatloaf, and I was Jim Steinman. And also I was Spider-Man. Because someone had said, I joined it a bit later, and someone phoned me up and said, oh, we've had a couple of Spider-Man jokes called. It'd be great if someone had a Spider-Man costume and came in and did Spider-Man. So I'm naturally being a big comic fan. I thought, yes! I found a spider suit.
I do think I remember Spider-Man.
I did an upside down kiss with somebody.
Yes, you did, hanging off the balcony. And everybody was like terrified and in awe at the same time.
I had to do an upside down kiss, yeah. So Adam introduced me to the improv, but I'd met Adam just before, because I'm an actor, but I'd done improvisation. So I'd done theatre sports, I'd done Hamlet improvised, I'd done Impropera. I did a musical thing called the improvised musical, the improv musical. And then through that, a guy called Dylan, who worked with Alan Marriott, I got introduced to Adam, and we started building Showstoppers, which I've been doing since it started. And so that's where I really got to know him. And then he introduced me to the Improvathon, and I did the Second World War one. But one of the first ones I had a sort of longer role in was a Victorian one in which we had Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah.
And we actually had Nicholas Rowe and Alan Cox, who were the Sherlock Holmes and Watson from Spielberg's young Sherlock Holmes.
Yes.
And I got to be a policeman in that scene. I can't tell you how exciting that was.
Amazing.
And Nicholas Rowe was quite, all these people are making a big deal about me. And Alan Cox has just been brilliant. And I remember I was trying to get Nicholas Rowe to say the game's afoot. As a policeman, I said, sir, is it time to set off on the mission then? Yes. Is there something you'd like to say? Maybe. Is there a phrase you'd like to inspire us with? Maybe. Is there something you want to say before you set off on any mission? And eventually you're, oh yes, the game's afoot. But even when he said it, I can't tell you how exciting it was to have a real Sherlock Holmes say to me, the game's afoot, with a Watson, and rush off stage.
Yeah.
So exciting that.
Yeah, I saw a little bit of that one. It's a great setting, and our setting. Yeah.
Indeed.
Which is fun to play in. I think it's been fun for us all to play in this like Victorian London literary world.
Yeah.
There's so much about it that is very familiar, right?
Yeah.
For so many things that you can kind of pull reference points in your own, so many things, like so many references that we were talking about in rehearsals. And obviously all of us have ones that maybe we're more drawn to or more familiar with, but it is that thing of Sherlock Holmes, like one of your characters in the show says, that has had time to do movies and
stage, film and television. How does he manage to fit it all in? Yeah. Brian Perkins does believe that Sherlock Holmes is a genuine person and has done all these things, despite his numerous changes of appearance. He absolutely believes it.
Yeah. I wonder. Is it definitely true that Sherlock Holmes was not real?
Oh, throwing a thing out there. Well,
it's a bit like dragons. I believe that dragons were probably real at some point. It's sometimes hard to know what's mythical and what's based in some faint fact of something somewhere.
I think it depends what you mean by real. Do I want him to be real? Yes. Should he be real? Yes. And if that's the case, then why can't he be real? Because I want him to be real.
Yeah. He represents something again.
Yeah. And the need for him is real. The space he fills is real. So that's real. Do you know that, we're going off on a tangent here, do you know that art exercise you do when they say, okay, instead of drawing the thing, draw the spaces around the thing?
Oh, yeah.
And when you do that, it's like you do a cartwheel or something like that. And you suddenly see it is the cartwheel, but it looks a little bit different because you've drawn the outlines of the spaces, not the outlines of the solid image. So, but the thing exists.
Yeah.
So by defining the space, you still create the thing that fills the space.
Yeah.
So if you define the space that Sherlock Holmes would fill, you're creating Sherlock Holmes. And that's what we're doing. We're defining the space. And having defined the space, what is that space? That space is Sherlock Holmes. Therefore, he's real.
Yes, I like that. What's real anyway?
Indeed.
Yeah. I like that.
I really like the fact that we all play him.
Yes.
I love seeing the different Sherlock. I love your Sherlock Holmes.
Thank you.
I really like your Sherlock Holmes. I think you look the best in the hat. I love Joseph's Sherlock Holmes. Joseph's Sherlock Holmes is very classic to me.
Yeah, he is.
He's
Joseph's got a great sort of actorly energy, which Sherlock Holmes also has. That he brings to this, I think, especially because of that sort of because of that world that we're inhabiting, this sort of the weight, this like literary weight, the importance, and he's really great at sort of holding that.
He does good Basil Rathbone, I think. Basil Rathbone.
Yeah.
I love Chloe's Sherlock Holmes because it's like, it's young and it's like, it's different, but there's that's the celebration of it. So I can be Sherlock Holmes.
There's also the victory, and I suppose, I'm not sure, without giving away too much about it doesn't really matter, does it? Giving away too much about the show. But yeah, it takes a while for Chloe to become Sherlock Holmes. And when she does, there's such a moment of celebration, I think.
And she sees it through to the end. So
yes,
she's
our ultimate.
She's the number one Sherlock Holmes in the end. Yeah. She solves it, and she's there at the close. She crosses the finish line.
She does. She manages to pull it all together. Yeah. Yes.
I find my Sherlock Holmes actually just becomes sort of rather clipped maitre d' Sherlock.
Yes.
If I'm honest.
But I found clipped was the way into Sherlock for me.
It is the way.
It's like sometimes my accent gets very extra. It's like that clipped. They almost. I'm just trying to think of a line that, like, sometimes when it comes out of my mouth, I have to almost pull it back a little bit. Committee. When I find myself saying committee.
All right.
Because it gets so clipped.
All right.
Because I think it's like a very, very heightened. It's not really like, I'm not saying that's the thing I'm doing or the way that I found the character, but it's funny how we have had to find like what's the different energy of each of these people.
Yeah.
Or that for me, I think is sometimes more useful, is to kind of like try and feel like, obviously we've been exploring accents for each of these characters, and we've been exploring like
I've certainly been exploring some
physicalities,
a geographical range
Yes.
of my accents.
Yes.
Not
Yes.
necessarily authentic.
Yes, again, just go for it.
Yeah.
That's that whole thing again, isn't it? Well, Lauren Silver, who's an amazing clown, says strong and wrong.
Always
And
good.
that's
Always
something
good.
great to live by.
I have one issue with Sherlock Holmes, which is that he never talks to people, talks at people.
Yeah.
Rather, and also because he's often talking out because he's ahead of us. He's
Yes.
thinking all the times, which means for me, I miss the eye contact with my fellow performers, and I often feel I'm getting isolated from my performers, but that is a thing of Sherlock Holmes.
Yeah, I really agree. I think that's, and again, the place where you feel uncomfortable is the place that you lean into further. And I completely agree with you. I'm so used to being, for me, the primary thing on stage is to be connected and to be in eye contact and to be with the person in front of me. That's what I always want to strive for. That's the most important thing. And there's this aspect with our Sherlock that Sherlock's the only person who is aware that the audience are there. Sherlock's in this very meta way, aware that we're doing a fictional play in the way that other characters are not aware. And that's a very fun game to play. But also that 10 steps ahead thing, I found that too, that it's kind of it goes against a lot of my instincts as a performer to hold that space of I'm disconnecting from you because I'm actually connected with something that is of my own. And that in being that, you can embody the Sherlock energy. And again, in trying to do what you think is good and right, you undercut and undermine and diminish the Sherlock energy. And it's actually by the other characters. There's one scene that it's me and Joseph where we're moving through different areas of London, obviously. And then, I'm supposed, as Sherlock in that moment, I'm supposed to be very detached from where we are, whilst Watson is looking around and taking it in and part of the environment. Yeah. And again, I totally agree with you. It's a very interesting place to explore. And that meaning that character is a very interesting person to explore because he forces you into a place that you don't usually think is a good place to be.
As a performer.
Yeah, but you then allowing yourself to be there is what creates the separation that Holmes needs from other people.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, it sometimes worries me, exactly everything you said, because so used to, the scene is in the other person, is the maxim that we use, and you need to look at them, support them, be there, have that contact. And yet Holmes is always turning out and addressing his thoughts outside, which makes it quite a lonely place, which he is.
And how often are we thinking, like, don't be in your own head?
Yeah, he's entirely in his own head.
He's in his own head, yeah. It's really interesting that. Yeah, very much. And also for me, I think finding the stillness for Holmes is I'm a very flailing person. My body goes every which way. And knowing that there is a character there that has to be very grounded and very still is also, in some ways, a really nice juxtaposition to what my body naturally wants to do if I'm just sort of allowing myself to feel and react and respond. But it's like finding this. Adam Megiddo, again, said a lot of times throughout the rehearsal process, all the activity is happening inside Sherlock's head, not in his body. And that's also interesting if you think about like the detachment that Sherlock has from his body, from his feeling, from his emotion. He's not being led or governed by those things. The whole point is logic and reason, and the deduction is completely, entirely a mental process. So finding that in a sense of like the body just stands there and the brain goes...
Well, the head leads. The head leads. It's like one of those physical theatre mime experts when your character is entirely led by the forehead. Yeah. His brain goes first everywhere, and the body follows. And your point, the point you make is absolutely true. Is that the stiller he is, kind of the more true that is for him, which is very hard for physical performers to do. But it's the other performers on stage. That's why Watson is there. Yeah. That's why Mrs. Hudson is there. They're moving about and they're focused on him. So he's he's the band leader, isn't he? He's the man on the mic.
Yeah, he's confident enough to stand still, maybe. And maybe that's my flailing too.
Yeah, that's our difficulty, yeah.
I'm not saying it's positive.
We're not quite confident enough
There's
to be
often times when I need to rein myself in. But it's interesting in this context to feel the real weight and gravity and benefit of that, especially, like you say, to be complemented by the other characters. Everything everybody else is doing, the stiller Sherlock is, the more he is, like you said, he's always the focus of the scene, and everybody else sort of runs around him, and everybody else, you know, does everything else, and he sort of creates this like rod in the ground, you know.
I think that's a thing as well that I think, you know, one has to, well, of course, you know, applaud Adam for that. He's brought us together, and we all have things in common, the four of us. Though, I mean, you and I have worked together on Improv a little bit. I think I've worked ditto with Joseph. I'd never worked with Chloe before, but she's worked with Adam before on magic shows.
Magic goes wrong.
But he's allowed us to be our Sherlock, and he's encouraged the assets that each of the four people have brought to show. Yes. I think that's, you know, that was very clever, and he's trying to incorporate that strength into the show. And I think that it's the first time I've worked with him just as a director. The other times I've worked with him, he's been a performer as well. So I've been on stage with him, which is quite intimidating.
Yeah.
But it was really nice to be trusted.
Yes. Very good how he, there was something we said the other day, I can't remember what it's regarding, but something I do that you said you were surprised I got away with it. And I said I was surprised by a lot of the things I got away with in this process in terms of, you follow a thing that you think is funny and you will either be told, stop it, don't do that.
Oh, the marmalade.
Yeah,
the marmalade.
or it's embraced. But I think that's one of the other wonderful things about Adam Megiddo is he's got a really good eye for, he does trust the performers, and he also does guide you. He'll tell you like, yeah, no, this isn't working. Do something else, find something else. But he's also very, very encouraging of like, yeah, okay. There's something he said in the process that's just show me something.
Well,
and I really like that. You know, like, what are we going to do with this scene? I don't know. Show me something, and then we'll see. And it encourages you to just make a choice, take a risk, try something, find something, and then we can go from there. And it's a lovely way to work.
And when we did the deductions, we had to create those. We devised that basically. We had the script, and the script said this is, and it said an amazing scene
an
happens now.
Award-winning physical theatre sequence.
Yes, which I feel we've lived up to, and we devised
Very
those.
Intimidating.
And it was Adam created a place where we could have ideas, as you have just said. He would say, "Show me something," and I would say, "I've got an idea. I would do this." And normally it would involve the giant rat of Sumatra. Yes. And normally he'd say, "No."
Well, I liked that we would have sometimes where it was like this space was created, and we would just be like idea until, and Adam is kind of staring into one spot, a bit like Sherlock Holmes. You can tell that his mind is like turning over all of these possibilities, and he's allowing all of our inputs to just keep coming at him, and then he'll go, right, okay, I've got something, I know what we're going to do. And it's you know, or stop now, we've had enough ideas, you're all just you're not saying anything useful anymore. And then we go in and we find it,
as he is prepared to trust us. I absolutely trust it, because he's the man sitting out there, and his eye, I will absolutely trust it. The idea I have might be a reasonable idea, but he, as you will say, it doesn't read, because I'm that, you know, I can't see that in that way. So fine, okay, well, let's do something different then.
And he's got a brilliant eye.
Very good.
Really good. For comedy and for drama and pathos and all of those things, managing to hold all of those things on the stage.
And also an understanding of beats and reading, as he said, the intentions. He obviously talks to us a lot about intentions.
Of course, yeah.
And my intention sometimes gets confused a little bit. As my intention is to get a laugh here, when perhaps it should be something else. Did you ever? Is this the first time he's directed you, other than an Improv the Fun?
Yes, yeah. I've wanted to work with him for a long time, actually. So it's a treat. And then, you know, so yeah, really, it's I've obviously Improvathons are really the only we've done quite a lot of that together, but it's a very different situation, because getting to do a rehearsal process and work with him as a director has been really lovely, really, really cool.
Yeah, I'm lucky, I think, in that I've worked with a number of directors who, for different reasons, I've all found inspiring, rather than just a director. So that would be Lindsay Kemp, who was scary at times, but also inspiring, really inspiring, and made me see things. What we were talking about, that authenticity of, no, this is a Lindsay Kemp show, and that's not wrong. They've come to see a Lindsay Kemp show, so I'm giving them 100% Lindsay Kemp, and you're all part of this show. And I learned a lot from that, and particularly about technique as well, his clarity of physical movement. David Glass, who changed my life, who's a physical theatre performance director, another man with a fantastic eye, but always interested in what's going on underneath the table. We can see the top of the table. What's going on underneath the table? Always wanted to open the doors and go to the dark, interesting places, but would physicalize it on stage in a brilliant way. Had a genius vision for things. And then I worked with a guy called Alan Marriott, who's nutcase, but actually has moments of, I don't know where they come from. They come from somewhere special.
Yeah.
That he could do sort of things, and I think I have to say Adam has a conciseness and insight in vision, into intention and storytelling that is very rare, I think, in directors, and a privilege to work with.
Yeah, it's been
That'll be £10, please, Adam. When you
Cha-ching.
Of your other shows that you've done, does any of them compare to this? Are any of them you think of, oh, this is like something I did this, or?
Yeah, I think there are aspects and elements. I think there are aspects in various works that I've done in a lot of the things that we've been talking about, whether it's sort of things that are clown-based or ensemble-based. I did a show called The Gin Chronicles for a few years, which was a sort of 1940s radio play live on stage. It had a lot of similar type of kind of humor driven by that particular period or those particular expectations of cliche. But I mean, I worked for about 6 years with a company called Craft Theatre. We did, that's Rocky Rodriguez Jr., the director of that. And that was very experimental. We went very, very deep. I mean, it was a physical theatre company, but again, very much about looking at and interrogating where we can go as actors and how we can open ourselves up to allow ourselves to open that door, exactly as you're talking about, not to shy away from the places that offer true vulnerability. And I think not necessarily that the processes or that these shows are similar to that, but I think in a lot of the shows that I've done before and in a lot of the shows that I did with that ensemble, again, we're looking at being in flow and being in connection and the intention mattering and leaning in and allowing ourselves to explore certain places. And as we've discussed, that's been something that's kind of come up through this process. And it's actually really lovely to find those links and similarities, because that ensemble and that process and that project, although we definitely had moments and found moments that were comical and comedic, those shows were not necessarily clown shows or comedy shows. That was a sort of actually very inspired by a much more sort of like Grotowski kind of approach. Grotowski and cognitive neuroscience, and it was really interesting, really interesting time, really interesting process. But I think what I'm finding is really lovely is the places where various things that I've done through my career that might feel quite different. Like I was saying to Chloe the other day, I feel like often I've always either done stuff that's very comedic and very funny and very light, or very emotional and deep and gritty, and I don't often find that I'm in a middle ground place. And I think maybe what I've been realizing in this rehearsal process is finding that middle ground place between those things. Is not about doing a show that is equal parts comedic and gritty. That doesn't that's a very particular thing, right?
Yeah.
It's more about finding that actually, whatever process I'm in, everything that I've done in my career or in my training or in my exploration as an artist, all does feed into this place that I'm coming into. And again, the notes and the instructions that Adam has given us, the questions and the prompts that Adam has given us through this process, that have brought me back to certain things that I wouldn't have necessarily thought go here. You know, I think I'd made a separation before in my head a little bit, despite the understanding of vulnerability in clown and knowing that all these places fundamentally come down to vulnerability at the end of the day. I think this process has really shown me that actually all of those experiences and all of those explorations and everything that I've looked for and discovered and kind of searched for and found as a performer are all here in this show in some way. I don't know if that makes sense. Like, not necessarily in the same
No,
way.
I hear you.
It's kind of like everything becomes, I'm getting to a point maybe, which is really nice, where everything becomes feeding into this one place.
Yeah, I think
Rather than feeling like, is it comedy? Am I doing clowning? Am I doing improv? Am I doing gritty, deep, Grotowski-based, devised theatre? Am I doing, I think what's really lovely is getting to a point right now where I'm finding that it's all one thing.
yes, I think I agree. I mean, I've done a lot of more extreme, let's put it that word, edgy kind of bits of theatre, both, you know, of either ends, you know, sort of physical stuff or extremely in your face, flat face clowning comedy on the street. And yet, you know, every job, some of those skills will be applicable, and it's as I get more experienced, I realize that I'm better at feeding in the elements that are needed from those jobs for this job, because each job is individual in its own way. And the other thing I find very familiar about this, which I haven't for a little while, is just the machine element. There's the performance, the physical performance we do, all the rest of it. But then there is what we refer to as our journey backstage, and there's the dealing with the realities of props, of moving things around. And that reminds me of David Glass shows that would be really complicated with a sort of set that you'd have to sort of clamber on and do all sorts of things, and the props you'd have to bring on, work and hold a lamp for somebody, and then rush over it here to put a sheet on the head and spray all these things. And we used to describe it as it was a machine, and you learnt the machine, and then slowly you learnt to inhabit it as a human and make the machine yours. So it stopped being a jagged machine and became a smooth machine. And there's been an element of that with this, because this is a very show that requires a lot of sort of technical requirements on stage of movement, light, sound, cues, being in the right place, dealing out the right props. And so I've enjoyed rediscovering that issue again as a thing, as a gift, as a thing. Oh, I can solve this. I can do my skills and hold a notebook and a pencil at the right time in the right place.
Yes.
And the fact that with those things, it becomes another. If you like, it's bespoke unto itself. This is what this show requires, and so I can focus all my other disparate energies into this aspect of it.
I love that. I really, really agree. I think that's one of the things, actually, you've hit the nail on the head of one of the things that I feel like comes out of other things I've worked within. So again, craft theatre and Rocky Rodriguez Jr. is very much about that journey, the journey of this show from beginning to end. Where does your body go? Like, you're going to repeat that journey again and again and again. And then once that's drummed into your body, you are now free to flow through it and inhabit, breathe life into that, so that anything can happen in any moment, but always within this set and learned journey, this particular journey that your body needs to do as you move through from beginning to end of a play. But we worked a lot in a really out of a sort of a poor theatre aesthetic.
Yeah.
So minimal props, minimal costume, minimal lighting and tech and all of that. And for me, finding that same thing of this show, which is very technical, incredibly technical, having that same sense of, even more so in some ways, well, my journey through this show, backstage, where do I go, what do I pick up, where do I need to be next, is the same. And I have to say, the stage management team at the Barn and the stage management team on this show, it's the support that we felt, I think, as performers has been extraordinary. You know, during the rehearsal process, it was occurring to me, you know, we would say something, we'd be like, oh, we need some kind of particular prop we need this sort of thing. And then we'd carry on playing, and within a couple of hours, we'd have some approximation of that prop handed to us. That was like magic to me, you know, having that kind of level of support and that level of, somebody who is always just sitting and listening and witnessing and going, this is what they need, how can we get it for them? And then, as you said, incorporating so many props and so many technical cues and so much that actually, technically needs to happen. You need to have a notebook in your pocket. If you don't have a letter to hand to me, suddenly the scene's gone awry.
I think,
you know,
in Showstoppers, which is another show I'm doing currently with Adam, well, not at the moment, will be again, and has before, which is an improvised musical. We have a band on stage who are improvising, but the audience don't notice them after a while. They're just watching us and they think how brilliant we are, blah, 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 blah. And they forget that band, they're making up every note they play, everything they do, none of it is written, but the audience just treat them as a band and sort of think they should be there, and there's that, you know, they're playing what they're meant to be playing.
Yeah.
They're making it up. And we can't do the show without them. Like that, we could not do the show without the technical team and the stage management staff.
No, absolutely.
I mean, they are so much like the musicians.
We literally can't do it without. Sometimes we try and practice something without them, and it's just, well, it's a vague approximation. I mean, you know, they're absolutely
even physically,
imperative.
there are things we can't do unless they are there.
Yeah.
And not to mention outside, you know, running the show, calling the cues, all those sort of things. I mean, that's as much a part of the show as us on stage. And, you know, the show would not be what it is without them. So I often feel it's rather unfair in one sense. Everybody's, the actor's marvelous. But you know, spare a thought for those people who are making it happen.
Who are doing really, really, really hard work. Yeah. Claire Miller. It's so interesting too what you said about Showstopper and the band. That's really... because obviously, I mean, again, the whole point in some ways of when you're doing an excellent job as a performer, especially as an improviser, especially as an improvising musician, is people don't notice. Like, you make it look easy, right? Yeah. Or especially in something like Showstopper. Showstopper's fantastic. You know, you're making a musical that is a high-level musical. It's not like, oh, aren't we funny messing up this musical? It's a proper musical. And the songs that you sing, and exactly like you said, the music that the band is coming up with throughout that show is top-notch. You know, it's really, really high-quality stuff that I think for a lot of people, that's the huge surprise, is that they're like, hang on a minute, this, you did a musical that was high quality and funny, of course. Like, of course it's funny, but not funny for being bad, funny because you're beautiful, funny, comedic improvisers.
I'll give you £10 later.
Yes.
It's your.
But it's like you have to make, what I mean is sometimes, and again, maybe it's that thing we were talking about before of like, actually when you're being really good at your job, maybe people won't notice you. And there's a whole nother layer and level of skill in allowing that to be the case. That people go,
I hadn't thought of that. That is true, because they are so good at their job that you sort of just, they're just doing their job. Okay, I'll watch the people who seem to be struggling a bit more.
And this assumption comes in, now this song. That's the whole point, I think, in Showstopper. You can easily buy into this is a new musical and sometimes forget. I think especially for a lot of people that are less used to watching improv or less familiar with improv. And obviously Showstopper's done a really good job at bringing improv to a lot more people. Obviously you have the Olivia Award and you have the first improv show.
I personally do have
you personally, Showstopper. And that Showstopper was the first improv show on the West End. You know, it's a really big deal that for UK improv. And I think that the idea of what improvisation is has really shifted over the last few years, and I hope it continues to shift.
Yeah, I agree. There is a caveat, which I think we've spoken about before, that coming from doing so much improvised work to working on a scripted piece, I have found quite hard to let my brain shift its gears. I'm very confident to walk out on stage without anything because I know, all right, I can get by. Experience has told me I can get by. I've got a set of basic skills that'll help me get by. This isn't a problem. I'm good. I'm happy here. But now I have the lines to say. And so my brain goes, oh, I've got to say this. So I've got to sort of, it's like, oh no, although that aspect of my brain, which is just let a word come, is no longer functioning, there's a specific word that has to come. And I went through a very tricky stage, still slightly going through it, where I have to focus much harder on that in my head in a way to stop myself paraphrasing, as we call it, because I know exactly what I should be saying, and I'm going to say it inspired by the moment and my improv skills. I will say it, but I'll say it in the way I'm going to say it that night, and it'll be different tomorrow night. That doesn't help with the cue. As you can imagine, they're waiting for me to say, I'm waiting for him to say geography. He hasn't said, you said French, you said mathematics, he's not said geography. So that's, for me, was quite an issue. Quite an issue, getting not actually learning the lines, but learning the lines accurately so that I'm not in the moment to make them up. I'm in the moment saying these.
And it was an interesting point you made about that. Not something that had occurred to me before, but that as improvisers, as actors and improvisers, we're simultaneously building these such complementary skills, but slightly different, quite different in that sense of, with a scripted piece, you need to say the exact words every single time. But with as you're saying, you'd spoken about that training. We've trained ourselves as improvisers over a lot of years to trust whatever our brain gives us. And our brain and our subconscious mind has discovered that its job is to provide us with something, anything. And we'll say yes to it because that's the agreement that we're in with our subconscious mind, I think, as improvisers. I think we're like, hey, you, give me something and I'll use it. And that's why you can be in that place of completely on the edge. What I think a lot of people perceive to be a very scary place to be. I don't think that we obviously perceive it to be scary because in some ways it's much, for me anyway, I think it's much more freeing. Like I like to go on stage with absolutely nothing because it's just a very different,
it's very pure.
The point of it is different. You're not there to know what you're going to do. You're there to find what comes and to discover something new and to kind of co-create something in the moment. And then obviously in a scripted piece, you're also doing that too, because we have to discover things in the moment and we have to allow things to be new and fresh every time. And we can't, just because you're doing a scripted piece, it doesn't mean that you're reciting the same process and the same, there has to be life in it.
Oh,
right?
Yeah.
And but finding that balancing point, I think you're right. And it's a really interesting point to bring up is like when the improviser brain actually starts to become a bit of a hindrance because your subconscious is so ready and willing to shout 100 different things into your brain when you're like, no, I just want that clear space. That moment of clear space for me to remember the word that it comes next, not the 100 words that my subconscious is excitedly throwing at me.
Yeah, I think this touches on a point that we've articulated quite a lot, which is I'm an actor.
Yeah.
I improvise as an actor. I don't want to be defined, though, as an improviser.
No.
And yet I occasionally do it myself.
Yeah.
I'm an actor. And the fundamental good actors are good improvisers because they know how to be in the moment. And essentially, that is all it is. In a texted piece, I'm in the moment with you, but the lines I'm saying are preordained. Whereas in an improvised scene, I'm in the moment with you and the lines I say are inspired just as much by that moment, but I'm free to choose them to articulate that moment. And if I'm really in the moment as an actor, really in it, then the words I say will be the ones that are written.
That's the thing. And I think that's the flip side of it. And that's ultimately the answer to the thing.
Yes.
Is actually you do obviously get to a point where you've learned the lines, you've drummed them in, and now what your subconscious mind will give you is the correct word. Because that's the next most obvious and natural thing. That's the next word. And your subconscious knows it just as well as your conscious mind does. And then you get to the point, obviously, in any scripted piece where that flow is experienced through. I love those moments where you get to the point with a show or with a rehearsal process where everything's in you enough that you're not any longer struggling with that thing. Now you're in the show. Now you know that the words are flying out of your mouth without any. You can again find yourself in that moment of having nothing. Like, because now you're exactly like you said, now you're in the present moment, and the words that are coming out of your mouth almost take you by surprise because they've been written by somebody brilliant who wrote them brilliantly.
Yeah.
They were not written by you. You don't have to come up with them. They're flying out of your mouth. That's the next natural word because of the thought process that you are following, because of the piece that you know you're performing. And it's at that point when everything becomes, natural, because you're embodied, you're inhabited in it. And then you just get to play your way through the show, which is, I think, why any of us do this. This is why I do it, maybe. I don't know.
It's why I think improvising is
fun.
such an important skill for actors to manage and actors to practice, because it just reminds you so much about that element of being in the present.
Yeah.
You know, the difference being that, as we just said, with a text piece, I'm on railway lines that are already laid.
Yeah.
But I can still really engage and this is the first time I'm on this bit of track tonight again. And inevitably it leads this thing, and I discover this station that we come to for the first time tonight, because I'm taking all my improv skills of that sense of presence to focus on that.
Yeah.
Whereas being allowed to, I can go, there are no tracks.
Yeah,
I'll discover something really new. But it's what you mentioned about bringing other skills that we've learned to that aspect. I think a strong background in improvisation really does help you be absolutely present in the moment and make each night special.
Yeah, because
rather than
all of
machine-like.
it is about discovery in the moment. So whether you're improvising or whether you're performing a scripted piece, you're discovering each moment. And I think that's also the thing that people misunderstand about improv. It's not necessarily that you're coming up with something, you're discovering it. So that's often one of the things I think when people are learning to improvise that can feel really difficult and tricky and get in the way is like, how do I come up with the idea that this piece needs?
Yeah.
You're like, no, you're not. You're just discovering it. So both those, that is the case in either case. And that is the case in performance, I think.
And when you get to that spot, then those words actually become an asset, because you can really invest them. Like singing a song.
Yeah.
When you come to a song in a musical, you may have sung it hundreds of times, but that night, when you come to sing that song, if you've invested in it, that is the right thing to do at that moment, and you will emotionally be authentic about singing that song. And as you know, the voices, the songs that we really register with an audience are ones when, that person really felt that, and I feel it.
Because the words are the perfect words to express the feeling and the thought process that you're in at that moment, because you've developed the thought and feeling process for the words, but you start to do it the other way around.
Precisely.
At first, you're doing it words first, feeling after, and then obviously once you've rehearsed and it's in you, you're doing it thought and feeling first, and the right words come, and it's a different experience. And it's really cool.
So, leaping off at a tangent to that, we both worked in burlesque briefly.
Yeah.
Which is a very contrasting school of performance.
Yeah.
Incorporating a lot of these skills, all the rest of it, but essentially is very much a weird crossover between an artist presenting a vision of themselves for audience approval. How did you get into it?
A friend of mine, when I lived in Liverpool, suggested it to me, asked if I wanted to do a burlesque double act.
All right.
And I went, yeah. And for me, it was at that time especially a really fun and interesting medium to explore, just because it is like there's a lot of crossovers with clown, there's a lot of and cabaret. There was a very fun and interesting cabaret scene, especially in Liverpool at that time. So it was kind of like also being on this circuit with a lot of performers that were doing various cabaret stuff. Cabaret and burlesque kind of was having like a thing. And I'm sure it still is. I just was doing it at that time. But yeah, I found that crossing point between something that is supposed to be about beauty and desire and seduction and the tease.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, yeah.
And I suppose not always, but from my perspective, femininity and the feminine body. Obviously, burlesque is
Yeah.
all genders.
Yeah.
But gender, it plays a big sort of part.
Yeah.
And performing gender obviously plays a big
It's
part.
It's much more a celebration of gender and the variety and shapes of gender. Do you not think?
Yeah. And like sensuality and desire and sexuality as something that can be, that is there to be played with. And I think there was a point of time for me where exploring that was quite interesting and empowering, but also because I've the heart of a clown. The stuff that I did, I think somebody said to me one time that it was like the most disturbing thing that they'd ever seen. It wasn't necessarily, our burlesque routines were based in the kind of subversion, often the celebration of that thing, and then a little bit sometimes the subversion of it as
Right.
well. But we had a range of stuff, and we did stuff that was more, I don't want to say traditional, because I think burlesque is traditionally subversive.
Yeah.
But traditional, I mean, in the sense of like what people might expect of burlesque being like just this very beautiful and very kind of the celebration of the form, which also is an important part of burlesque, and it holds that. So I wasn't saying that we're subverting it to say that isn't correct. Like, I think all of that comes into the parcel and the package of burlesque, that it just creates this very fun and interesting playground.
Well, I agree. I think I was introduced to it through Sarah Louise Young.
Oh, yeah.
She got me a gig, and essentially they were looking for a sort of I don't know, a butler MC character. So I was dressed up in a ridiculous outfit, and I had to be very affected, and I was essentially linking acts and also leading the audience through varying venues. And I did it a number of times. When we went out and did it in New York, and I hadn't worked in burlesque before, and I found it really quite awe-inspiring, actually. Just the celebration of individuals' creativities. People would turn up and they'd spent a lot of time making the most extraordinary costume.
Yes.
That also, it wasn't just a costume, it would do something.
Yeah,
The
that's
lights
it.
would ripple in it, or then it would open up and it would turn into a flower. And it was such a celebration of individuals.
Yes.
That I really, and most, not all the performers were women, but a lot of them were. And I thought, this feels very empowering, that there's such variety of shapes, types, ages, delivering this thing, celebrating themselves. And I think originally, I stand to be correct in this, burlesque was a little bit teasy.
Yeah.
But within that element of teasing, when you tease someone, you are celebrating yourself. You're saying, look at this, look at my shoulder. I'm teasing with my shoulder.
Yeah.
And you're celebrating yourself. And it's now become expanded in our contemporary world to a greater celebration of the individual or whatever as themselves. And that subversion was always in there, I think, because it was, gentlemen go to a burlesque club.
Very risky.
It was slightly,
risque.
Absolutely risque. And now that's become much more a sort of subversion of all sorts of things. And so there's a wider gamut of acts that happen in burlesque, right? Basically variety. But it's still that celebration of everything with just a slight edge to it. And I think that's beautiful.
You're right. And the tease is also a very pure audience-performer relationship that you're developing too. It's like, again, a lot of similarities to clown, I think. Like, oh, you like this or you like that?
Well, it's
you know what I mean. And it's the back and forth. And I think you're absolutely right about the individual performers. And a burlesque act is the amalgamation. It's like the idea, the song, the concept. It's a concept embodied, or it's a concept created. Like. From beginning to end. And I think you're right. The idea of the costume, or what the costume does, or how the concept operates, is really a big part of it. So that's where like the idea will come out of, like, okay, one of mine was to do with this idea of like women being sexy animals.
Right. Right. Okay. Where are we going?
And it's just such a thing that I've always, that's like something that goes always hand in hand. Halloween costumes or whatever it is.
Oh, yeah.
be a sexy animal.
Oh, yeah.
Be a cat.
To quote Friends, slutty nurse.
Right. So I did one where I was a pig, and I was a sexy pig, but I had like snort Tourette's. I couldn't help myself but be a pig. I was really genuinely a pig. But so it was like that idea. And when I don't know if this will be edited out, but at the end, I had 6 nipples. Like I had pasties all the way. Like it was
Teats, I think. Other
teats.
Words. Teats.
Yes,
the word
please.
Teats.
I had teats all the way down. I had a lot of teats, and I think it's the expectation that, well, if you want to find an animal sexy, like the pig was definitely playing that game, but was still a pig, and at the end was a pig. So I really enjoyed like the creation of that concept because it made me laugh, and because it's those things of taking something that exists within the paradigm or within the culture or within like a certain expectation, especially an expectation around sexuality or desire or how we perform gender or how we perform for one another, or and just allowing yourself to look at it from a slightly different angle. And I think in all cabaret, actually, burlesque and cabaret is really about the celebration of like concepts and ideas. It's like, here's one little piece of something for you. And then if you're seeing a cabaret show, you can see a whole bunch of different performers doing a whole bunch of different little pieces of something. And it's a really lovely form, I think.
Yeah, I think and we've spoken about burlesque and comedy and cabaret and clowning and sort of darker sides and text. And for me, the thing at root of this as a performer is the word play. We're doing a play. We play on stage, but all the performance styles we've just been speaking about involve an engagement of play with the audience.
Yes.
You were talking about teasing. That's play.
Yeah.
So we're playing, and when play is good, you don't really care about why you're playing. You're just enjoying this moment of play.
Yeah, and why do we play?
Yeah. And
there's that thing of you learn something 10 times faster if you learn it through play.
Completely.
You think about the level of importance that people now understand that play is for children. And I know this is a completely different tangent, but like the idea that children should be educated from a young age to kind of like sit down and calm down and copy out lines and learn in this very sort of behave yourself fashion and learn how to be an adult when you're 4 years old. And actually allowing children to play is they're learning through play. So there's this idea that, and adults too, right? So there's this idea that play is frivolous, and it is. And it's like, because it's frivolous, that doesn't mean that it doesn't hold great importance. And why, it's also an inner impulse that we have. It's also something we do naturally, and it's actually not something we learn to do. It's something that we're taught not to do. Every single human being inherently knows how to play.
And wants to play. Because that's why they come to the theatre.
Yeah. And there was a quote, I can't remember who said it, that was, we don't stop playing because we grow older. We grow older because we stop playing.
True. And I think that essence that the audience kind of don't sort of realise, but they engage with it subconsciously and they want it because it's this, they're telling us a story. It's a let's pretend this is 1870 London. It's actually Cirencester, but fine. Okay. They've made a great massive jump that is a childish jump of play, if you want to describe it that way. But they love it because it engages them. And once they've made that leap of engagement, as we were talking about, we've been engaged in making the show, the audience become engaged in following, watching the show. Yeah. They're in it. They're involved in it. They're playing with us. And this show has a lot of play in it. I mean, some of the scenes we do, specifically we do, are very playful.
Yeah.
The running about the street of cliches, as we call it. And those scenes are always, go back to that comment about how Holmes gets a bit isolated, are sort of easy to play, I think perhaps for us, because we're much more used to those elements of play. And I think it's vital in any sense of show, for us to discover that honesty and authenticity, to have that play in there as part of that. And when we're being playful and the audience are playful with us, then it's humming. It's really going.
Everybody wants to experience their imagination, to be brought into a world. Even if you think of like escapism, even, or, you know, like even thinking like, there's that very classic thing of during the pandemic, like what did people lean on? What did people go for? Apart from the key workers and the aspects of society that we discovered are absolutely the most necessary things. But yeah, I mean, it's the entertainments. It was like watching films and listening to music and reading books. And it's kind of like remembering that art is sort of, people want to engage in their imagination and they want avenues to do that, especially if their lives don't usually offer them that, you know, in the way that maybe ours does because of the choices we've made to live in our imaginations. And yeah, I think it's really important stuff and really lovely to be able to offer that for an audience, especially now, to kind of always to remember that it's a good thing to create spaces where people can come and allow themselves to sink into another world, or a world of imagination and a world of possibility. And maybe what we were talking about before in terms of vulnerability and all of these aspects that we think are at the core of performance, it's also like us allowing ourselves to be playful is giving permission to it's a gift for other people, I hope, that maybe find play a little bit more tricky or a little bit more difficult for themselves in their own life. Is, as a performer, you give the gift of going, okay, well, we'll play and you come and join in and we'll all be in this together, but we'll do the bit that you might find a bit more tricky. But still, every audience member is going to allow themselves to sink into this world of imagination and this world of possibility that I hope can be fun and enjoyable and respite for people.
Oh yeah, I think it's a privilege. It's really, again, it's a thing that Adam, with his idea that we should be thinking about how we affect contact and interact with each other, and intention, how our intentions change what we do in the effect we have with each other on stage, is this element of play. He wants that to be very ever present, and it's a privilege to be able to play, and it's a privilege to be able to offer it to the audience, to say exactly as you said. We're not expecting you to come up on stage and join in with us, but you're in the room.
Yeah.
So you're part of the event, like a sporting event. You're the crowd, and you absolutely affect this massively.
Yeah, and as became very, very clear, we had a very intense tech week for this show. Obviously, we've said it's a very technical show. And after our rehearsal process, then being in Tech Week, you know, we're running things technically, we're getting everything in place. And we got to the point where we've rehearsed this show, we've run it. And obviously, as with any show, it became very apparent to me, though, once we finally got the audience in, it's like the play cannot become until there is an audience. And I think somebody said to me, once we had the first audience in on the first preview, oh, was it scary now having an audience in? Was it difficult now having an audience in? And I was like, no, I was so relieved. It's like that play needs that. You can't do a play for no audience. What are you doing?
Yeah, it's like swimming,
you
but having
can play
no
by
water.
Yourself. I mean, obviously, but I mean, the nature of a show, the nature of a performance, it requires the audience. The audience are necessary. They are absolutely an active component in that. That energy exchange, that back and forth, is as much a part of the play as anything that we're doing. And this is what I'm also finding really lovely and beautiful about this play, is discovering it each night with an audience. It's not just about us discovering it each night on stage. It's about us discovering it each night in response to the people that are there that night. Yeah. And to the energy that they bring, and to the things that they're finding funny or interesting. Yeah. Or to there is a feedback loop of energy. And I think that's a very key aspect of performance. Otherwise, it's not performance, it's something else. And it still might be, you know, of importance. But for it to be a show, for it to be a performance, for it to be a performative event, the audience are like key. And as soon as we had an audience, I felt like that's when this became a show.
The audience are often, well, they are the fuel, aren't they? Yeah. The energy, and when we'll get through it. if there's no audience there, we'll run through it, but it will be, we'll say it's very dry, you know, we're doing it by rote, we're doing the moves. Well, we might be amusing ourselves a bit, but it's not the same. As soon as an audience is in there, suddenly there is more energy because there's more people, there's more energy in the room, and it becomes an event.
And it's it's built to connect.
Yeah.
It's written to connect something, to connect people together. So having the chance now to be in this run and doing this run for lovely audiences. We've had lovely audiences every single show. Very, very full audiences, very responsive audiences. It's a pleasure to
Very
do
appreciative,
that. Yeah.
How long have we done?
Like an hour and a half. How long was that?